Para dar comienzo a nuestra programación, no es un secreto que la inteligencia artificial, el Big Data y el Internet de las cosas son algunas de las tecnologías que están revolucionando los sectores industriales en la última década. Por supuesto, el control de plagas también puede hacer uso de su potencial, por ejemplo, a través de la inclusión de sensórica para obtener respuestas más rápidas sobre la captura y origen de plagas en tiempo real. Para conocer cómo la tecnología puede convertirse en un aliado ideal para controlar y garantizar espacios libres de plagas, damos la bienvenida a Marc Potzler. Él es tecnólogo ambiental de Paul Smith's College y licenciado en zoología de invertebrados, con énfasis en entomología de la Universidad Estatal de Nueva York. Potzler obtuvo la certificación de entomólogo por la Sociedad Entomológica de América en 2015 y actualmente se centra en plantas de procesamiento de alimentos, donde es necesario reducir el uso de pesticidas a través de prácticas de saneamiento adecuadas, el mantenimiento de las estructuras y el personal debidamente capacitado. Con ustedes, Marc Potzler.
Gracias. Good afternoon, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Marc Potzler. I'm a technical expert with Rentokill North America, and I'm also a board-certified entomologist. I have over 20 years' experience in the pest control industry, and I would like to talk to you today about some revolutionary new technology that we have in pest control that will help keep your food products safer. But before I begin that, I would like to thank the coordinators of the exposition today for inviting me down here to speak with you all, and also my colleagues at Rentokill for inviting me down to Columbia to speak. I'm from the United States, as I mentioned, and I'm happy to share my experience with you. So, to begin to set the stage, I would like to talk about integrated pest management. Integrated pest management, or IPM for short, is a system that we use to control pests that employs multiple methods to keep the pests under control in your facility. It's a holistic approach that uses sanitation improvements to remove the reason that the pest wants to be there in the first place. We use exclusion to keep the pests from getting into your building in the first place. We use treatments, of course, to eliminate the bugs and the mice that have gotten into your facility. And we use a lot of monitoring. We use sticky traps, we use mouse traps to detect where the rodents and where the pests are entering your facility so that we can record the data and track where the pests are coming in so that we can control them more proactively. This is the heart and soul of how we perform pest control at Rentokill. And we're about to get better because with our monitoring, with our tracking of the pest control or the pest activity, we can better be proactive at the pest control and get ahead of the pests before they even come in. One of the new technologies that we have to do this is connected devices. We have interior and exterior rodent control devices that sense when a pest enters the device, and it sends us an alert immediately. So rather than waiting several days or maybe several weeks to respond to a rodent caught in a trap, we know as soon as that rodent is caught, and we can enact an immediate response to come out to your facility to remove that rodent before it creates more of a problem. And we can also inspect and treat the area further immediately before any other rodents can spread throughout your facility. What this means for us is that we can be more proactive for you. We can handle your pest problems much better, much faster, much more effectively. What it means for you, our customers, is that we are 24/7 monitoring your devices. We're not coming in once a week anymore. We're not coming in once a month anymore. We know all the time when a mouse is caught. So when an alert gets sent out by our traps, we respond by sending a technician to respond to that alert. Our technician can home in right on that trap that has the problem, solve that problem, and then with the rest of the time, knowing that there are no mice in the other traps, that technician can now go spend much more time and do a much more detailed inspection and a much more thorough treatment in your facility. So you get much better service out of us. The devices that we use, we have interior devices, which are shown up top, a small sensor attached to a mouse trap or to a rat trap, has infrared beams. Just like your old spy movies, when a mouse breaks the infrared beam, that sets off an alert that tells us the mouse was caught. Our exterior devices, shown below, can detect whether it's a mouse or a rat-sized creature that entered the station. So again, we know that we had activity in that station at that time. That may help us to determine where the activity is coming from. Did a truck come in with a shipment that brought the mice in and the mice were caught in traps right at that time? That may help us find the ultimate cause of why you have the problem. Now, when our specialists come to do the service, they record everything on their cell phones. We have a secure app on our phones that we use to scan the devices with a barcode, and in that way we can record the activity on our phones, and at the end of the service we complete the work order, and that information goes to our secure server called Rentokill. I'll talk more about that at the end of the presentation. But while the specialist shows up on site to do the service, they can open up a floor plan which shows all of the devices in your facility, and it pinpoints which ones need to be addressed. If a mouse is caught in a trap, if a rodent bait station has had activity and needs to be serviced, if the batteries are going low and need to be changed, we know all of this in advance, so we can focus our service right where those devices need to be serviced. The rest of the devices around your facility, the system tells us they're in good shape, so we don't have to go check those. We can go do a more thorough inspection for you. So to sum this up, we begin by monitoring. We focus heavily on using monitors and using inspections in our services, because the days of just walking in and spraying, that's in the past. We want to be more proactive, we want to be more effective for you. So we focus on inspections and monitoring, which allows us to reduce our reliance on chemicals in your facility. I think we all want that. So with the monitoring, we get an alert, we respond to it. We generate a report afterwards, which allows us to find trends in the activity, patterns. Maybe it's a seasonality where every year in May, you get a lot of rodents. Well, that tells us next year in April, we need to enhance our rodent control program because we know that next month there's going to be more rodents. And then that allows us to optimize our control program. So, with all of this free time that our technicians now have, because they're not checking an empty mousetrap, now they can do this inspection. And an inspection is an art form. It's not something that you can just walk into a grocery store and look for a pest. You can't walk into a bakery and look for pests without knowing what you're looking for. So to do this effectively, you have to put yourself in the bug's position underneath the shoe. A lot of pests hide in very cryptic, very difficult to find places that you can't normally see while you're standing up. So we need to inspect more thoroughly, use tools like endoscopes or mirrors to look underneath equipment. So I want to take you through a handful of the more common pests that we see. And some of these are going to be more prominent in other parts of the country. I know in Bogota here, the pests are much more different than they are on the Caribbean coast, and much more different than they are up in the United States as well. But many of them are very similar. So rodents, including mice and rats, oftentimes come in very small openings. It could be a very large opening like an open door, but more often it's a very small opening, maybe about as big around as your pinky finger for a mouse to enter your building, or about as big around as your thumb for a rat to enter. So these are often overlooked openings that need to be sealed up to keep the rodents out. Underneath doors. If you're standing inside your facility and you're looking at a door that goes outside and you can see daylight, you need to fix your door because rodents can squeeze underneath your door. Sewer pipes are a very common way, especially for rats to enter a building. Sewer rats will crawl up, and if there is no grate on top of your floor drain, they can walk right up into your building. And in goods, rodents oftentimes hitchhike into your building on a pallet of goods, in food or in equipment. So it's important to inspect this before it comes into your building. Now, as far as food safety concerns of rodents, it probably doesn't need to be said, but I'll say it anyway. They mechanically vector many, many pathogens. As they're crawling around in sewers and on the floor and in all these other very unsanitary conditions, they then crawl up onto your food preparation surfaces and into your food packaging looking for food. And as they go, they're leaving a trail of contamination behind. Does anybody know how often a rodent defecates during a day? 40 to 50 times in one day in your food facility. It's very important that we get control of these rodents before they set up shop in your building. And as they are traveling through your building, they are leaving much more contamination than actually eating food. You have to throw out more food than they actually eat because of this contamination that they cause. Now, a very common way for mice to move through a building is gaps around pipes. Rodents like to live in walls because it's dark, it's concealed, the cats can't find them there, and they can come out through small openings around pipes like this, gather some food, and stash it back inside that wall void and then make their nest there. So even on the inside of your building, small openings like this are very important to take care of. Cluttered areas are another very common place for rodents to begin to set up an infestation. Once they get into your building, if they get into your supply room and your supply room looks anything like this, and for the record, this was a storage room in a grocery store in upstate New York that had hundreds of mice living in it. It wasn't until we got the customer to clean up all of this, store everything up off of the ground, store it neatly, not just piled up, that we were finally able to find all of the holes in the wall that the mice were living in, and we could eliminate the infestation. So undisturbed, dark areas are favorite spots for mice. And if you run a grocery store, the bottom shelf, underneath the bottom shelf, I should say, is a very common spot for rodents to be active. Because how often do you clean up the debris, the spilled food and the clutter, the garbage that gets kicked under there? It's not normally on your radar because you don't see it as you're walking through the store. But these are the types of areas that need to be paid attention to in a grocery store, in a restaurant, in a food manufacturing site. It's those areas that you don't normally look at. And this is what our Pest Connect system and our IPM strategy allows our technicians to do, is gives them more time to find areas like this where pests may harbor. Now, rats are very similar to mice, but they also act very differently. They may have different ways that they enter a building, such as an open sewer pipe. In this case, you can see a clearing on the bottom of the pipe that indicates the rats were climbing out of this directly into the facility. Very simple fix. Put a cap on the pipe, no more rats. But what if this pipe is inside your wall void and you can't see it? That is a much more difficult spot to find, but our trained technicians can home in on spots like that. It really does require a lot of cooperation between you all and your pest control provider, though. In this case, we were getting rats inside a grocery store. This is the receiving dock. did the rats come in on the delivery truck or through the wide open door? That door was open for an hour while I was there doing an inspection. And the customer was wondering why they had rodents in their building. So keep doors closed when they're not in use. And when you get a delivery, do an inspection on it to look for obvious signs of rodent activity. If you see droppings, if you see chewed food product, reject the package. Send it back to the delivery. Don't allow it in your building. And lastly, coolers. Now, if you're on this side, it may be difficult to see the photo over there, but we have inside a grocery store a cooler with flowers in it. There's nothing wrong with this photo, right? But what about the motor that is underneath that cooler? That motor has a condenser next to it that has a drip pan to catch the water from the humidity. So you've got heat and you've got water. And less than 1 meter away is a tray of tomatoes and all the veggie leafy greens that that rat could want. So even a situation like this could be a potential rodent situation. So very important to inspect and monitor these situations. Probably one of the most dangerous food safety pests in the world is the German cockroach. These hide in very small places. 2 to 3 millimeters wide is enough of a gap for a German cockroach to enter and hide. Now, they often like a very warm, humid, dark environment, which is very common in many restaurants, many grocery stores, many food manufacturing sites. And oftentimes the cleaning practices encourage more water and more humidity, and it makes it very difficult to control these pests. But when a cockroach comes into your building, it's usually as a hitchhiker. The German cockroach typically comes in on a person or in a package of something. Once they get inside your building, though, they will spread out. This is actually a tropical African animal. So when you take an animal that's used to a very warm, humid situation, and you transport it in a box of food to Bogota, where it is, I found out, not very warm, these animals are going to go to their most natural habitat that they can find, which is going to be motor housings, ovens, dishwashers, and the walls around those, because they're very warm. So as they're traveling around through your facility looking for food, they're scavenging in all sorts of unsanitary conditions, as well as our food preparation services. So very, very serious concern with food safety here. Now let's look at a couple of potential German cockroach harbor spots. Over here, we're standing down at floor level. This baseboard tile here, you can see the stainless steel plate right above it, is not secured to the wall. There is a gap that you could almost fit your fingers in behind that stainless steel, and that extends up for several feet. There's the potential for thousands of cockroaches to live just behind that steel plate. And it's all because that gap above the baseboard tile was not sealed up properly. Again, many employees walked by this spot day after day after day, not realizing that's where the cockroaches were living. Inspection and monitoring helped figure that out. This dishwasher tray, there is many, many months worth of food stuck to the bottom side of the conveyor belt, which offers unlimited food for cockroaches. And again, with the dishwasher, very hot, very humid, lots of food, great spot for cockroaches to live. And the last photo we see is an electrical junction box. This was in a restaurant underneath the front counter. We were treating for a long time, trying to control the cockroaches, not realizing that behind many stored boxes underneath the counter was this electrical junction box. And if you can see all of the shadow, the brown shadow around there, that is the cockroach feces. This problem has been going on there for a long time, and this is right where the food is being served. So good, thorough inspections and not leaving stuff stored in one spot for too long. We need to rotate things so that we can inspect and treat properly. Oops. I got ahead of my notes, apologize. The American cockroach is similar to its smaller cousin, the German cockroach, but behaves much, much differently. These are the large ones. Again, this is a tropical species. So when you take it to a cooler environment, it is going to gravitate towards a very warm, humid situation in that spot. So these are very often found in sewers, and they will come up out of floor drains if there is no obstruction to keep them from coming into your facility. Now, these don't typically go into they don't live in appliances the way that a German cockroach will, but they will live inside wall voids, inside the sewer pipes, and as they're crawling around looking for food, they're contaminating your food contact surfaces just as much. So a dry drain pipe, such as in this unused men's room, we can see in the utility sink, the roaches crawled out of the sink because the trap dried out. They were able to come out of the sewer directly into the sink, but then they couldn't climb out. They died there. But what about this floor drain in the men's room? It's an open hole that goes directly down into the sewer. There's no cap over the top of it, so the roaches were able to come up out of the sewer and directly into the building. Very easy spot to exclude pests. Cinder block walls. In this case, we're in the mechanical room of a cheese factory. On the other side of the cinder block wall, they were making cheese. So obviously a very delicate situation from a microbiology standpoint. There were hundreds of American cockroaches being found in this room. And you could see the large holes in the wall around the air ducts that the roaches were coming out of. So easy solution, treat inside the wall void, and then seal all of those openings up. But you have to be thorough. When you seal these openings up, like our customer did for us, they did a very good job sealing that hole up. But 6 inches away, they left an opening that was several centimeters wide. So it almost worked. Now, phorid flies are a very, very difficult pest to control. These feed oftentimes on feces and on soil that has been contaminated by feces, such as around a farm, and also on animal protein. So they will go after carcasses, dead meat, that sort of thing. A very common spot to find phorid flies in a facility is living in the soil underneath the building, because the sewer line underneath the building broke, and your sewage is infiltrating the soil underneath your facility, and the flies are breeding there. And then they can crawl up through small cracks in the floor, and they're inside your facility. You can only imagine the food safety concerns with this. Imagine the fix to it is to dig up the floor and replace that pipe and replace all of that contaminated soil. It's a very, very expensive situation to fix. It requires a great deal of inspection and monitoring to make sure that we've got the correct spot that the flies are coming from, because these are, again, very difficult and often very expensive. So easier situations would be maybe underneath this toilet where it wasn't cleaned properly and the soil from the bathroom floor got pushed underneath the toilet. The flies were breeding there. By properly sealing the toilet to the floor, we could have prevented this phorid fly problem. In this case, this is inside a sausage factory. All of the animal fat that hit the floor got pushed over against this doorway and underneath the threshold of the door into small cracks in the door frame. And they were having a very bad phorid fly problem here. And I walked in, looked at that, scraped some of the material out with a knife, and found the phorid fly larva very quickly. So areas like this need to be sealed up properly. It may involve a little bit of capital expense on your part to fix some parts of your building to eliminate these areas that the flies are breeding in. But it is the only true solution to it. And sometimes your drains will have issues. With a hose going down into another drain, if there's any kind of fat or animal protein going down there, the flies can breed right in the drain. So keeping your drain pipes cleaned out properly is very important as well. Anyone keep bananas around the house? You probably have seen fruit flies before. Now, there are a couple different types of fruit flies. This is what we call the red-eyed fruit fly. The red-eyed fruit fly likes fresh foods, stuff that still looks like fruit or fresh juice, maybe a cup of cerveza. They go after stuff that still looks like food to us, but is just starting to ferment, got a little bit of yeast odor to it. Very simple solution to control these flies. Make sure all of your food is covered up so the flies can't get to it. Store it in a refrigerator if you can. Make sure if you have a restaurant or a grocery store with a juice dispenser, make sure those drains are cleaned out properly and frequently, because these will breed within a week. So good sanitation, you don't have problems with these flies. But they have a cousin, and this cousin is much more difficult to control. The dark-eyed fruit fly, often found in restaurants, buzzing around as people are trying to enjoy their meal. They're breeding in materials that are much more broken down. It's wet organic matter, sometimes the mop water, as we're dumping the mop bucket into the sink, it will splash across the floor, and then it gets underneath the mop sink and ferments there. That's where the dark-eyed fruit flies breed. It's a much more difficult spot to reach, because for us as exterminators, we can't get chemical underneath there to kill the flies. We have to fix the problem that is allowing the flies to be there. And our IPM inspections would give us the time to find spots like this so we can tell you what needs to be done to solve it. Now, of course, we can treat for it. We could put traps out and help mitigate the problem, but the ultimate solution is to find that source and eliminate it. In this case, in a commercial kitchen, they were using a power washer to clean the floors, and it was pushing food up into the wall void. Flies were breeding directly inside the wall. Or, in this case, in the storage pantry for the food, some cans of tomato juice had fallen off, broken open, and the flies were breeding right in the food storage facility. Or, we have floor drains. Very commonly blamed for fruit flies, and oftentimes they are there, but floor drains are not usually the prime spot for fruit flies. It is a very common spot, but not the only one. But all of the wet organic material that builds up in those areas is what the fruit flies are after. Now, from your food manufacturers, you've probably run into some stored product pests before. There are a lot of species of beetles and moths that will go after our dried food products. And that's dried grains, dried wheat, dried corn, flour, noodles, rice, dried vegetables, dried meat. Any dried food product we have is susceptible to at least one of these insects trying to eat it. Now, to control these can be very easy. You follow your FIFO, your first in, first out, your food rotation cycle. Obviously, if you have a bag of beans sitting on the counter for months and months and months, it's more susceptible to an infestation than a bag that comes in and gets cycled out very quickly. But also, keeping your facility clean will help out a lot with stopping these from being an issue. In this case, we're in a food warehouse, and there was a bag up here that a forklift broke open as they were loading that pallet onto the slot. Very common occurrence in a food warehouse. What happened when that bag broke open, all of the material in there fell down, all of the grains fell down and landed inside of this upright. You can see them all down here. Very difficult spot to clean, so it didn't get cleaned. All of a sudden, we have moths flying around the warehouse. Where are the moths coming from? By doing a proper inspection, using the right pheromone traps, we pinpointed it to this row of pallets, and then a good inspection showed us what was going on here. Now, another situation could be rodents. Mice and rats like to hoard food for a rainy day, which we have a lot of rainy days here in Bogota, I found. So the rats will collect food and stash it somewhere so that if their normal food source disappears, they can go back over there. So this could be a rodent food stash too. So rodents and stored product pests often go hand in hand. And do you work with flour? If you have a lot of flour in the air, it's going to land on everything. If you work in a bakery, if you work in a grain mill, you know this already. If you don't work in those, now you know flour gets everywhere when you mill it or when you run it through a sifter. So if you have a shelf that looks like this with a bunch of flour on it, you can see little zigzag tracks on there. That is beetle larvae feeding in there. That tells you you've got a problem and you need to, number one, you need to clean better. Number two, you really need to contact your pest control provider, get a good opinion on what a good cleaning cycle is and what treatment methods are available. And the last pest I want to talk about are birds. As much as rodents and cockroaches are a very severe threat to food safety because of the pathogens that they spread, birds are probably just as bad, if not worse. Because birds are associated with over 50 different pathogens. Birds like to fly, which means they can walk right around our traps. They can fly right in through an open window, right through an open door. They leave their droppings behind, which number one is a slip, trip, and fall hazard right outside your facility. Number two, if all of those droppings are at your main entryway into your food production facility, your employees are tracking that bird feces into your facility, along with those 50 plus pathogens that might be in there. If you have an audit coming up, a government food safety audit or AIB, a third-party audit, typically if they find birds in your facility, you fail the audit automatically. And if anyone has gone through an audit before, it's a very expensive process. If you fail because a bird flew into your facility, that's a lot of money down the drain. So managing birds proactively is a very, very good idea. Now, I understand there are a lot of laws protecting wildlife, even the pest birds here in Colombia, so options are limited. So it's very important to have a good relationship with your pest control provider so that we can find solutions to keep the birds out of your facility. In many cases, it may be trapping and live removal. Maybe we can seal up some openings in your building. Maybe we can install some nets to keep them from getting in. There's a lot of different ways to do it. We also may offer sanitation services to clean up the droppings and get rid of the pathogens that are there. So, how do birds get into our facilities? This was a dock door, an inspection I did in Kentucky, United States, just a couple of months ago. And I'm standing on the dock leveler looking into the truck. Right down there is daylight. I can see a sewer grate out there. So there's an opening probably this wide at the bottom of that dock door where pigeons can easily fly in without even slowing down. Situations like this, very easy to correct. Maybe not cheap, but the situation is very obvious and easy to correct. In this case, we have an overhead door. If you look closely at this overhead door, you can see some material up at the top there. That's bird nesting and bird droppings hanging down. I'm inside the facility looking at a bird nest, and this is a food production facility. How they did not get shut down is beyond me, because there were birds swooping down around me as I was in the facility. So even though your overhead door looks to be sealed properly, if you see a situation like this, there's obviously gaps on the outside where the birds can get up in and then drop right into the facility. And lastly, outside of your dock area, how often do you clean that? In this case, there was dog food spilled right outside the facility. It was drawing birds right to the facility. And then we have that opening by the dock doors where the birds fly right up in. So all of these go hand in hand, the sanitation, the exclusion, the inspection and monitoring that gets coupled in with a treatment by your pest control provider to mitigate the birds. But if the food isn't there, the birds don't want to be there. They need food, they need water, they need a place to live. Let's take away all right, we're in Bogota, we can't really take away the water, but we can clean up the food. We can seal up the openings. That takes away two of the needs for the birds to be there. You will have less birds around your facility. So, let's bring this back to the technology side of things. So we started out with what is integrated pest management. It's using multiple methods to control pests. One of those methods is connected technology, which detects the rodents for us, gives us more time to do inspection for the pests that we just talked about. But what do we do with that knowledge after we've gained it? As I mentioned, our technicians will scan a barcode on our traps and record the data on that barcode. They will record what pest was caught, how many pests were caught, did they apply any pesticides to control that pest? Do they have any recommendations, such as a spilled food on the floor needs to be cleaned up, or a hole in the wall, a dock door needs to be sealed up properly? All of this gets recorded on their phone, so when they complete their service that day, it gets uploaded to Rentokill, which is our customer portal site. Once they complete their service, it gets uploaded here. You, as the customer, have instant access to all of the pest records, to all of the materials applied, to safety data sheets, to a map of your facility showing where all of our devices are, to insurance certificates, business licenses, and trend analysis. So once we start collecting data, month after month, year after year, we can start to see patterns in the activity. And it's broken down, color-coded by pest. You know, this is one pest, this is another pest, this is this month, this is that month, this is this year versus the next year, and you can start to see the trends showing up. This data we can harness, we can analyze it, look at the graphs, look at the charts, and say, okay, we have a problem at this part of the facility every year at this time of the year. We know it's going to happen next year because it happened this year, and it happened last year, and it happened the year before. So why don't we go a month before next year, go a month before this is expected to occur, and really amp up the pest control service to that part of the building to deter that pest from setting up shop in the first place. That is the power of the technology that we have. So again, to sum it up, our specialists scan the barcode, record the data. That data goes to, or we enter the recommendations and the pest activity. That gets transmitted to our secure server, which goes to Rentokill. You can even get an email of the service report directly to your inbox. And it goes to Rentokill where you can view it instantly. Again, we can graph the activity, we can chart the activity, be much more proactive, much better partner for you in your fight against pests to keep your food safe. And that, my friends, is the future of pest control. And if anybody has any questions, I would be happy to take them. Gracias. Yes, sir. If you speak English, I can take your question directly. If not,
La inquietud que tengo es en el caso de aves, específicamente en palomas, para evitar el posicionamiento al interior de una instalación, ¿qué distancias o espacios mínimos se podrían permitir para evitar que ellas hagan anidamiento o posicionamiento?
Sí. So the question is, with pigeons in particular, what is the minimum opening size that a pigeon can use to enter the facility? Pigeons are roughly that big across, so 3 to 4 inches in the US. I apologize, it would probably be about 20 centimeters roughly. So anything about that big, basically if you could fit your fist into it, a pigeon would be able to get in there. Oftentimes, pigeons are nesting on ledges, though, not necessarily getting into the facility, but nesting on pipes or ledges on the outside of the facility. And then they can fly into the building through an open door, for example. Does that answer your question, sir? Thank you. Any other questions? See.
Hi. Can we include or register other type of plagues into the software, like spiders?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Can we include or register other kind of plagues, like spiders?
Can we exclude spiders?
No,
And,
exclude, include.
can we include them
Yes.
in our pest control program? See. Oftentimes, when you build a relationship with your pest control program, they may tailor your pest control program to what problems you're currently having. So if you call initially with a mouse problem, we will sell you a service to keep the mice out. If you require something more robust, we can tailor a program to include any pests that might be prevalent in your facility, be it cockroaches, flies, spiders, mosquitoes. We pretty well handle it all.
Okay, thank you.
I have a few minutes left if there are any other questions.
Hi, Mark. With the experience we live with the COVID-19, where we can see how the rats and the mice change their behavior because of the lockdown, what can we expect? Or what is your point of view? How can we be prepared to avoid this kind of uncertain times? Obviously, what could be the alerts that we can see according with their experience in this kind of situations like we experienced with the COVID-19?
So how can we avoid a rat plague again if we experience another?
What we saw is, example, the rats change their behavior, look for food in other places because there are no food in the places they were used to look for, so they go to other places. From your point of view, what you see in the environment that can be a threat for us in the industry of food, according with what is happening right now in the environment?
Oh, that is a very difficult question, but a very good one, so thank you for asking. COVID-19 caught the world off guard, and the increase in pest activity we saw due to that was a secondary, a very important but secondary part of the issues with COVID, obviously. A lot of the reasons that we saw an uptick in rodent activity is because of the lockdown. Many people were not going out to eat. Restaurants were closed down. There was no more garbage. There was no more dumpsters where the rodents could feed off of where they normally fed. So their behavior did change. So they had to expand their range. They had to go to new places to look for food. So a lesson that we can learn from this to try to avoid such a problem going forward is proper sanitation, proper garbage management for everybody, not just the restaurants, although I've seen plenty of restaurants where the dumpsters are overflowing and there's garbage on the ground. But I've also seen plenty of residential streets where there's garbage bags on the ground. And even if the garbage bag is intact, rodents can chew through wood. A thin plastic bag is nothing. So really a more robust garbage management strategy will help with that in the future. Take away the food source that they're going after. In addition to that, rodents need a lot of cover. And while Bogota is absolutely beautiful with the amount of plants and landscaping that's here, I love my visit here this week, all of those plants offer a lot of good cover for rodents to run undetected. And if there are buildings that have holes in them, doors that don't close, or maybe no doors at all, that allows the rodents to come right in. So a proper exclusion could be impossible depending on the situation, but the more we can do to seal up the buildings, to close those doors, to seal up those openings, that's going to be more effective than anything at keeping the rodents out.